The manhwa begins with a newlywed couple asked to share the kiss of the vow. Vivian, the man, Alex Ribbon Cruz calls out as he caresses her cheeks, "She Vivian von Karlsruhe." He leans in forward to kiss her, while she silently counts down in her head, 5, 4, 3, as she reaches for a sword hidden in her dress. On the second to the last countdown, a smirk tugs at the corner of her lips and finally, with the last one, she executes her attack. He calls her name in disbelief, asking with shaky breath why on earth she would do that as she drives her sword into his head. Wails from different people fill the hall while some others declare that the Empress be seized for killing the Emperor. But in the midst of all that commotion, a person's reaction particularly stands out. Tears well up in her eyes as she stutters, "Alex?" Behind the crowd of panic-stricken guests, the Empress stands, with no trace of guilt. Instead, her bright green eyes lock onto her next target, Stella, her sister, and the next minute, she lunges at her. The wedding built upon blessings ended in bloodshed. Trapped in endless regressions, our heroine has died and come back dozens of times, but no matter how many times she tears them to pieces, her rage doesn't subside. But in this life she'll be different. Who cares, whatever offends my eyes, I'll kill them all if I must, for revenge. Our heroine's name is Vivian von Karlsruhe, the only daughter of the prestigious Karlsruhe ducal family. When she was 7, she became engaged to Alex, who had fled to survive the prince's rebellion. Alex Ribbon Cruz, the 5th prince and illegitimate child. Was it because I felt pity for him who had been driven out of the palace and wept like a lost puppy? But nevertheless, she wanted to protect him. The emperor collapsed and a bloody storm swept throughout the empire. The prince's rebellion, a brutal struggle of killing and being killed, dragged on for 5 years. And even under her family's protection, Alex lived in constant fear. They missed their target, but she held his hand tightly, assuring him it'll be okay. For Alex's sake, she made up her mind and relayed to her father that she must become empress. Her father, concerned for his little child, asked if she must really walk such a painful path, but her mind was already made up. She declared that for Alex there's no other way. He asked again if she really has to go that far, and with a bright smile she discloses, "For Alex, she'll do anything." So she began. She sowed discord amongst the princes, gathered noble support to secure Alex's position, secretly built a network of merchant guilds and collected the funds and intelligence he needed. Finally, Alex, the 5th prince, who was once farthest from the throne, became emperor. Thanks to her efforts, Alex secured his position as emperor safely and she became empress. But even after 5 years, she couldn't give him a child. Although he consoled her as his wife, he also told her he doesn't think he can handle the pressure from the ministers any longer. Mentally worn out from the past 5 years, she recommended her cousin and maid Stella as the royal consort. She was tired of making him lie with a woman he didn't love for the sake of an heir and hoped there wasn't something wrong with her. Not long after, the first prince, Aaron, was born and Alex spent more and more time with Stella. He no longer sought her and she grew lowlier with each passing day. On that faithful night, she insisted she must meet him, but instead she was frozen in place by the conversation going on in the room. Stella asked how long they are going to keep being like that, while he responded to her teasingly, "You want to become empress that badly, huh?" With that she quickly reminded him he promised her, and again he reassured her, asking her to wait a little longer, stating the Duke will arrive in the capital soon. She stood there, her chest tight with the feeling of betrayal as she questioned how he could do that to her. But her resolve shifted. She knew she needed to inform her father. After all, it might not yet be too late. So she wrote a letter to her father informing him the capital is dangerous, but by the time she sent her urgent letter, her father had already passed away. At her father's burial, Alex tried to play the role of supportive husband, but instead what he got was a slap in the face. Confused, he asked her what she was doing, but she just asked him to stop pretending, revealing she heard his conversation with Stella. With tears pouring down her face, she asked how he could do that to her, especially after everything she and her father did for him, but his response was cold. He told her that's exactly why he hated it. He told her it felt like he owed her forever and remarked that she could have just been exiled and called it done. Gripping her dress tightly, she asked if he was trying to frame her for a crime she didn't commit, but instead he responded that the Duke must have had so much money. If you hadn't sent that letter, the Duke wouldn't have died, so just stay quiet. It'd be a shame if you ended up dead too, wouldn't it? Think how much your father invested. And with that he walked past her, leaving her standing trying to trace where everything went wrong from. Was it when I couldn't conceive? Or was it when I decided I wanted to protect him? What's the point of all of it now? Later, a maid walked to her with a bottle of wine explaining that she'd prepared that since she's been complaining about not getting enough sleep. She thanked her and even shared she was glad at least she was still by her side. However, everything fell apart the minute the wine touched her lips. Her visions blurred and she collapsed to the floor, betrayed by the last person she thought she had. The next time she woke up, a strange shirtless man confessed he was summoned by the Empress. The Emperor, with pure disdain, questioned if she'd lost all sense of shame even daring to bring a male courtesan into the palace. Her situation flipped in the blink of an eye. She was forced to her feet by the palace knights while the Emperor announced her sentence. She was to be stripped of her title as Empress for committing adultery and imprisoned in the Western Tower. During her time in prison, Stella paid her a visit one day. With a smile she disclosed she was there to thank her for everything. She admitted she was in love with Alex even before the two of them got married. She revealed she was so anxious during that period, worried she'd have a child first. The realization hit and she ran to her, questioning her about her miscarriage, but she calmly revealed, "That's right, it was us. How was the final gift? You looked lonely at night, so I arranged it for you." As a final resort, she asked her if she believed she'd be able to live happily like that, and she replied unbothered, "Yeah, I think so. Now that the Duke is gone, nothing stands in our way." She watched her live that day, unable to do anything but a popular saying stuck in her head. They say when our life ends, the gods prepare the next one. If I'm given a next life, I will find them, tear them apart 1,000 times and have my revenge. Even if my hand are stained with blood. But as fate would have it, she found herself back to the day of her wedding. Before her was her groom, her Alex, the boy she swore to protect, asking why she's so tense. The first time she turned back time, she couldn't even remember how she killed him. It took dozens of tries before she eventually began enjoying the way his face twisted in fear. And then she got faster at killing him. Until Zed showed up. If the commander of the Imperial Knights has shown up, that must be the end, or so she thought, until suddenly a voice declared, "Protect Her Majesty the Empress." The Blue Wolf Knights. Her father appeared. Zed insisted they move aside, noting she was the one who murdered the Emperor. However, her father stood his ground. He mentioned his daughter would never do something like that without a reason. A smile appeared on face. Her father was known for his cold rationality, but if there was one illogical principle he held, my daughter Vivian is always right. Wrapped in her father's warm embrace, she revealed Alex has an affair with Stella. Her eyes become watery in an instant as she discloses how he killed her baby and completely ruined her life. She told him no matter how she killed him, the rage doesn't disappear. Her father asked if there was no one to help her, but she tells him it was only him. "But Alex killed you too, you were everything to me." Filled with rage, her father questioned if they should really let such a vile man die too easily. Softly caressing her cheek, he insisted he just suffer as much as she did, so didn't he die too comfortably? The people around try to stop him, but he orders them to be silent, asking if he hadn't betrayed his daughter. "You're right, father. Being betrayed by someone you trusted, there's no pain like it. Losing the only person in the world who was on your side, I shouldn't have let him die so easily. The pain of losing a child, having your honor thrown to the gutter overnight, being pushed to the edge until you have to consider taking your own life. They need to know exactly what it feels like." As a voice called her attention to the ring, the realization hit her, she'd really come back to life. Now, after everything, paying closer attention to Stella, she realizes her dress looks a lot similar to hers. Suddenly a voice startles her out of her thoughts. It's Alex. His confession rings out, "I truly love you," but instead she simply scoffs, "Love my ass, you bastard." Her thoughts press on. Even now, the scumbag is probably fantasizing about a peaceful life with her. And that woman is busy dreaming of becoming the Empress. As he slides the ring onto her finger, she thinks, "It took them 5 years to steal everything away from me. I'm not planning to wait that long. Let's get this over with fast and clean." After exchanging the vows, Stella walks up to congratulate them on their wedding. She makes a simple request if she can catch the bouquet, and now she questions how she couldn't notice something so obvious back then. Holding the bouquet, she really looks like the bride. With a smile, she suggests they do it according to the rules and toss it in front of the grand hall. At the same time, some guests come over to congratulate Vivian on her wedding. Just as she thanks them, she glances to the side and notices Alex's full attention on Stella. Catching them off guard, she appears behind them and asks if by chance there's something wrong with Stella's outfit, but he just says it's nothing, glancing in the opposite direction. Turning to Stella, she informs her even if they're childhood friends, she shouldn't call him so casually anymore. Stella, still playing smart, explains that he was just trying to comfort her since she didn't give her the bouquet, but she cuts her off again. "And you shouldn't call me sister anymore, it's Your Majesty the Empress." She sighs softly as she reminds her she'll be entering the palace as a maid under her command soon, so she should be more careful with how she speaks and acts. She hears a familiar voice call her name and turns to find her father, who points out that she doesn't look so well. She restrains herself from speaking, biting the corner of her lips bitterly before facing her father. She takes his hand and promises she wouldn't do anything without his knowledge. In response, her father simply asks her not to push herself, just live the way you want. Her maid informs her they're running out of time, and she pulls her father into a warm embrace before she leaves, thanking him. Lastly, she promises to be in touch. Later at night in the palace, she orders her maid to call for Stella. A few minutes later, Stella arrives and boldly helps herself to a table prepared for newlyweds. Around that same time, Alex enters. His voice cracks as he questions why Stella is there. Taking his seat, he points out that night is supposed to be their first night together as husband and wife, and unexpectedly she just says that's exactly why she called her. She drops her tea and declares boldly, "I have no intention of spending the night with a man who rolled around with another woman, it's disgusting." Color drains from their faces in an instant. Alex frantically searches for his words, asking her to explain it to them in a simpler way to understand, but she doesn't pay him the slightest attention. Rather, she turns to Stella. "Stella, you wouldn't like it either, right? If your man slept with another woman." Alex tries to frame it as a misunderstanding, but even before he can finish, Stella blurts out an apology. She explains that she only did it because she loved him too much, since she was always busy most of the time and it was just the two of them together since they were little. Then Vivian scoffs. "Yeah, I was busy, I wonder why that was." She reminds them how she worked her butt off for years to support him, but in the end love received through the body turned out to be better. But he continues playing victim. He tells her he had a hard time enduring it alone. He blames her for neglecting him and admits it's true that Stella supported him during that time. But his words echo in her head. Neglect? For whose sake did you think I went through all that hell? Ungrateful bastards. Unexpectedly, she asks when he was planning to bring in Stella as a concubine, but he just looks confused. She offers to jog his memory a little. She reminds us he claimed the two of them were in love, so he must have planned to keep her close. She asks him what'll happen if she eventually gets pregnant and demands that he brings her into his bedchamber starting from that night, but he snaps, pointing out that it is their wedding night. He goes calm and explains that wouldn't do since there are too many eyes watching, but she just informs him she'll assign Stella to his palace as a maid. He tells her she doesn't have to go that far, and then she remarks, "Really? Then carry on where I can see you, don't sneak around anymore." She orders them to leave her room and leaves a last warning with Stella: be careful not to get caught by others and especially watch your words. Once they take their leave, she slumps onto a chair alone with her thoughts. She wants to kill them at that very moment, but she needs to hold on a little longer until she can get her revenge. At Duke Karlsruhe's estate, Vivian appears. She immediately demands to see her father. Alfredo informs her he's in his office, but as she asks if he hasn't gone to bed yet, his expression softens. Inside her father's office, his reminds her once again that he's always on her side, noting she only needs to think about her own happiness. She notices the dowry document for her husband and asks to take a look. The dowry her father prepared was by no means small. Diamond mines, prime and in the capital vast sums of cash. Looking at it now, she thinks it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say she must have been utterly mad. Going through the documents, she asks if he intended to give everything stayed inside it to Alex, but he reminds her how she'd said it herself, that an emperor without assets lacks power. She drops the papers with a silent remark: she'll be taking it all back anyway, but still she asks her father to put all the assets in her name. Her father retorts: it seems you sailed into a stoke immediately upon becoming empress, but in response she tells him it seems she boarded a ship already caught in the storm and just didn't realize it until that moment. Then her father asks, my daughter, will you calm the storm, or will you abandon the ship? But her answer isn't in the options he provided. I'm going to completely destroy that shop, father. On the other hand, Alex asks Stella if she thinks Vivian will let it all go just like that. He also questions how she could have possibly found out, but she snaps, asking if he's really suspecting her. He tells her that isn't what he meant, but she grits her teeth in annoyance as she ponders. I was aware he is a coward, but when he grovels before Vivian like this he's just so pathetic, but none of that matters, I just need to become a more perfect empress than Vivian. Stella mood switches. She mentions Vivian might never sleep with him again, but he just responds in an unbothered tone, stating that doesn't concern him since he never planned to have kids with her. Stella teases him, stating for someone who doesn't care he seemed upset earlier, but he just tells her he needed to pretend to be upset at least since the Duke was still alive with sharp eyes. But in truth, he wanted to at least share the marital heat with her just once. He brings up the issue of succession, asking what she intends to do about it, but Stella quickly displaces his worry. You have me, don't you? Since I'm Vivian's cousin, any child I bear can be said to share the same blood. Lastly, she adds, while sister chases futile dreams, Alex, you consolidate your power. There's no way I'll let my child be taken from me. He pushes her onto the bed and teases, so you're determined to become empress yourself, aren't you? But her response is sharp: it's an ambition you permitted me to have. Starting today, for 1 week, a festival will be held to celebrate the marriage of the emperor and empress. The festival begins with the emperor and empress receiving their first official greetings, although it is merely a formal occasion for exchanging pleasantries and observing each other. The imperial family's financial crisis was severe, and due to the crown prince's rebellion, national affairs had become divided, so there was no better opportunity than that to restore relations with the nobles and foreign delegations. Seated on the throne, her lips curl into a smile as she thinks, whether it goes well or not, it is none of her concern. Their first guest, Duke Luft von Berliner, came and paid his respects. The emperor accepted his pleasantries and also took the opportunity to start some small talk, revealing his duchy, centered around Betrayal, is a place he's always wanted to visit someday. On the other hand, a smirk forms on Vivian's face as she questions if that is really something to say at that moment. The Betrayal port owned by the Duke is a place frequented by many foreign ships, and thanks to that the Duke accumulated great wealth. However, it was an open secret that the Duke did not pay taxes accordingly. She scoffs silently as she realizes the fool probably really thought it was just a resort, not even realizing how much weight the emperor's words carry. The Duke takes his leave and is immediately replaced by Marquis Max von Bender. He asks if the emperor can manage to recall the severe drought that struck his territory before he ascended the throne. He finishes stating at that time the empress offered them great help, but she just waves it off, stating she merely did what needed to be done. She also thanks him for coming, especially when his territory must still be recovering, to which he disclosed he only came to show his face. Her gaze lingers in the Marquis as she considers. The Marquis does not enter politics due to his many duties in his land, but he is a man of firm conviction, so although he may be stubborn, he is someone who does not betray. She informs the Marquis she will arrange to send supplies to his territory later, and he thanks her. Since Vivian remained quiet, the first greeting ended without any real result, and many people's expectations of the new emperor quickly turned into disappointment. They hold a banquet at night, and as they walk into the banquet hall together as the light of the empire, Stella trails quietly behind them. Once the people around notice her presence, the hall is immediately filled with murmurs, with people questioning if the empress brought her cousin in as her lady-in-waiting. "That's a bit strange," another one replies. "Why would he be assigned to serve His Majesty directly?" It doesn't take time for them to notice how even the emperor's robe is being carried not by the chief attendant but by her cousin. Could it be, are they intending to bring Lady Stella in as a concubine? Throughout their whole conversation, Vivian's father stands in a corner with a frown, filled with rage. The emperor makes the welcoming speech, but just as he outstretched his hand to Vivian asking her to dance, Stella immediately rushes to adjust his fit. She explains that since they're at an important event, she wanted the emperor to look even more dignified. The emperor, on the verge of snapping, points out still, she can't just touch him like that out of nowhere. But Vivian steps in. She suggests she must have moved out of habit, asking if she just couldn't stand the emperor's robe wrinkled, and she says yes. However, the guests present remain hung up on a phrase she used, out of habit. But something even more shocking happens. Vivian takes their hand and places it together. Then, as if hurrying out of the situation, she pleads with her to just take the first dance as well, remarking that they need to get the banquet started. It doesn't sit well with Alex, and he goes after her asking if she really has to go that far, but instead, she reminds him of her warning, for them to be careful. "But what can we do? They've already found out." He tries to speak, however Stella stops him, advising they just do what Vivian says, since everyone seems to have figured it out anyway. She goes down a little, bowing her head before accepting his hand. The crowd, however, remain hooked on what is unfolding before them. They're not planning on getting divorced right after the wedding, are they? It's not even wrong for His Majesty the Emperor to take in a concubine. But to be honest, it's an affair. Before Vivian steps out of the banquet hall finally, she takes one last glance at them, then enjoy yourselves. After the banquet ceremony, Alex finally snaps. He demands to know if she really had to do that at their own wedding ceremony, questioning how she could have let Stella have the first dance. But her reaction is indifferent. She reminds him they'd already spent the first night together and asks what's the big deal about the first dance. She informs him in advance that it'll be the same way going forward. You from the Emperor's position, and I from the Empress's position just need to fulfill our duties and responsibilities. We just need to play our different parts. Alex, cornered, now resorts to his victim tactics. He asks if she hadn't said she understood him, but she quickly clarifies that she's actually doing that because she understands. "I can't comfort you physically, not that I have any intention to." She doesn't end there. She tells him Stella will do what she does best, leaving her to do what she does best. Immediately Stella jumps in. She grabs his hand, agreeing with Vivian instead. He returns to Vivian. He asks after running the first day like that what she plans to do the next day, to which she replies, "So, I thought about it. Let's just announce Stella as a royal concubine tomorrow." Stella appears pleased with the news, immediately rushing forward to thank her while Alex remains behind, silent. When he finally speaks, he asks if she really isn't going to seek his opinion, mentioning he's the emperor so she can't just decide everything herself, but her reply is the same: "This concerns the inner palace, managing concubines is my responsibility." He storms outside of the room after that while Stella remains behind. Vivian notices and asks if she isn't going to go with him, but she just mentions there's a lot to learn after becoming an imperial consort and if they shouldn't discuss that now. She realizes and informs her she will be given the Lily Palace and will also be assigned lady-in-waiting. The Lily Palace is the largest and most beautiful palace after the Empress's palace. It's used by the Emperor's most favored concubines, so it was closest to the Emperor's palace. Now that she's gotten what she wanted, she asks if she wouldn't mind getting lost. After she takes her leave, some ladies come up to her questioning how the emperor could do that to her. She responds, her words laced with bitterness as she admits it's her fault for trusting that bastard, and with that they all hurry to comfort her. Later, a low-ranking tax collector from the Ministry of Finance, Vivian's unofficial aide, comes to her with the documents she requested. She apologizes for summoning him so late, but he just brushed it off. He passes her the dowry list her father sent. Then as she goes through it, she asks about the bank vault created under Alex's name, to which he disclosed the personal vault was left untouched and only the official rowdy was deposited into the emperor's account. She asks about the current state of the imperial finances, and he reveals they are trying to cover the daily accumulating interest. The minute she suggests raising taxes, his face lights up and he tells her if she does, that will definitely make things easier for him. Lisp was a top graduate of the academy but was constantly overlooked because he was a commoner. He was stuck doing grunt work, cleaning up after others and getting pushed around everywhere. Then an unmistakable voice speaks, 1,000 gold brain doing 10 gold work, what a waste. His cheek flushes as he asks if she wants to work with him. She teases him, her voice sharp as she remarks that it seems he's earned enough, that he's now picking comfy jobs, to which he simply replies, the more money the better, I'm just not used to seeing the worst of humanity while working. She simply remarks that it's a shame since he'll be seeing a lot more from then on, but he simply says if the pay is good, he'll try to endure it. Then for his first task, she asks him to stop the Minister of Finance from saving the empire's finances. She recalls Count Andrei von Patera, a veteran who's held the finance minister position for nearly 50 years. With brilliant ideas and thoroughness, he's saved the dying imperial family multiple times, and he's sure to find another way again this time. But she must stop that man no matter what. Then Lips suggests bringing him over to her side, but Simony tells him if that was possible she would have done it already, and even if it worked it'll draw too much attention. Immediately he takes his leave. The ladies rush back to her asking if she has a plan, but it makes only a few words from her mouth to comfort them. Well, I'm not just going to sit back and do nothing. Afterwards she declares the Empress Palace will not respond to any rumors regarding Stella and Alex, and anyone without prior approval will be denied entry. The ladies all cheer in agreement to her new decision. Then she turns to Helena and informs her they have a place to visit before tomorrow's council meeting. In a new scene, Helena trails behind her, panic in her voice as she asks the Empress if she's sure they're at the right place. But she just noticed, Black Mercenary Guild, found it. From her memory, there's a man called Chris there. As a child he was abandoned in an alleyway, then taken in by a mercenary group by chance and followed them around. That's when he discovered his talent. Then she spots it, a man barely kept, about to devour a piece of chicken. She immediately goes to him, but just as she asks if he's Chris, he pauses. This guy in 3 years, will her actually become a swordmaster? She goes straight to the point and shares her intention to hire him, but he just asks why, to which she simply responds, because I need someone. He asks for the terms, but instead she simply asks him to name his price, be it food, clothes, a place to sleep, stating whatever he needs she'll provide it. He asks if that is all she has to offer, but she has one more thing up her sleeve. She heard what he wanted before this regression. If you want, I'll even get you married. Immediately his expression changes, his empty eyes of before now sparkling. He asks if he'll have kids also, but she just tells him kids are determined by the heavens, so she can't guarantee that. He agrees and stretches his hand to shake her, but then he pulls back, considering maybe she doesn't like dirty hands. However, completely catching him off guard, she takes his hand, leaving herself in his care. The next morning, they attend the first official state meeting. The Emperor asks if there are any other proposals. Vivian with a smile then asks, Your Majesty, how about bringing in Lady Stella Vire as a concubine and assigning her the Lily Palace? Alex however suggests, maybe it's too early, but Vivian quickly counters that. She tells him everyone already seems to know, so it's better to make it official and uphold his dignity. He turns to the others seated at the table and asks what they think, but they simply respond that they'll go along with the Empress's judgment. The Minister of Finance then asks about their thoughts on the budget of the Lily Palace. We should divide the budget allocated to the inner palace of. Then the Empress speaks. She tells him it's not like she doesn't understand the finance minister's difficulties at that moment. She mentions currently only the Emperor and Empress's palace are occupied, so they can simply divide the allocated budget evenly between the two, which the finance minister notes will be quite inconvenient for her, but she simply responds with a question. What can we do? Everyone has to tighten their belts. The Emperor turns to her, discomfort written all over his face as he asks if she's really okay with that, but she simply asks if it isn't in difficult times like that they must help each other. Stella visits the Lily Palace, while the maid behind her quietly notes it hasn't been fully cleaned yet. She simply turns to the maid, asking her to forget the cleanup, pointing out that what the palace really needs is a makeover. She goes ahead, noting the floor should be white marble, the curtains in bright colors, and portraits of her and the Emperor at the entrance would be perfect. However, the maid suggests she takes a look at the allocated budget first. The next minute her resolve breaks. Gripping the paper with trembling hands, she clarifies if that is for the month. However, the maid quickly corrects her, it's for the entire year. Immediately she asks how her sister could do that to her, but the maid quickly explains that it isn't that the Empress herself is being unfair, it's just that the Empire's finances are just that bad at that moment. She sees her life flash before her eyes and immediately questions silently, it's the imperial family and where this broke? And how does the Empress even survive on a budget like this? She asks the maid if she's saying that is the same amount as the Empress's palace, and she says yes, but Stella just questions how she's supposed to believe that. Then her perfectly built disguise shatters. Sister's already loaded, she could live just fine without the imperial budget, so shouldn't all of it come to me instead? She orders to be taken to the imperial palace immediately. However, she doesn't foresee the way she'd be treated. The ladies block her entrance. They inform her she can't just show up like that without an appointment, and Stella, still self-absorbed, only asks when she ever needed an appointment to see her sister, but the lady quickly clarifies that she isn't her sister but the Empress of the Empire. Even if you weren't polite before, please be polite now. Stella's face twists in disbelief. As her composure cracks, she snaps, demanding if they really think they'll get away with that attitude, threatening to report them to Alex. But just then, the Empress enters unexpectedly and Stella switches up in an instant, calling her sister unprepared for Vivian's answer. She narrows her eyes, her gaze fixed on her as the words fall out, "Who said I'm your sister?" Addressing her as the Empress, she reveals she'd come because she has something to say, but Vivian just orders her to come back with an appointment next time. You're a royal consort now, what nonsense is this? In a new scene, Vivian's carriage pulls to a halt in front of her father's estate. She rushes out to greet him and afterwards inquires about the man Helena brought in before. In response, he asks if she's referring to the one who's practically a beast, stating Alfredo had a terrible time trying to clean him up. Facing her father, she asks once more where he is now, only for him to calmly point out that he's standing right in front of her. She remains confused and again he points out that he's right in front of her. This guy? Chris? Okay, but does anyone else think he holds a close resemblance to Kalik? Judging from how uncomfortable he looks, she knows it definitely must be Chris. Glancing at him, she hints that he has to get used to wearing uncomfortable clothes since women like dashing men after all. Then she turns back to her father and tells him she'll explain everything once they're inside. As they walk, her father can't help but observe Chris. He's glad to see he's more put together than he expected, but something about him looks familiar. Inside, Chris drools at the sight of the neatly arranged sweets and desserts, immediately helping himself to one. Breaking the tension in the room, Vivian casually mentions his name as Chris and he's a wandering mercenary. She also mentions among mercenaries, he's known as the Black Wolf. From his nickname, her father comments that he must be so skilled. However, she tells him still, he needs to help him grow even more. Glancing at her, he asks if she means more skilled than Alex, but with an unexpected calm, she tells him Chris is already better than Alex. She reveals her intention. She'd like him to train him to become a swordmaster, prompting her father to ask if she's planning to use him as her bodyguard. However, she simply remarks that using a swordmaster that way would be a waste, but her father once again insists that nothing matters more than her life. With that, Chris also chimes in. "You must not die. You promised me, remember? That we'd get married." Vivian, realizing there must have been a miscommunication somewhere, tries to explain there has been some kind of misunderstanding, but he doesn't let her say her piece. Instead, he asks if she's lying to him, reminding her she mentioned she would marry him. Observing his sullen expression, she wonders when she ever said she would be the one to marry him, recalling she clearly stated she would find someone for him. Wasting no time, she immediately clears the air. She informs him she already has a husband, hinting that if he does well she'll introduce him to another woman, but his question brings her to a quick pause. "Is she as pretty as you?" Her dad responds on her behalf, quickly noting that it's impossible, and when he asks why, he explains that it's because there's no one prettier than his daughter in the world, stating she inherited only the best from her mother, never caused any trouble. Lastly, he assured him he'll be sure to introduce him to someone just as lovely. Looking at his daughter, he silently notes, she has to remain empress if she wants her revenge. But again, Chris asks, "So if your husband dies, can I marry you?" She looks at him, not attempting to hide the shock on her face. Then she speaks hesitantly, stating her husband isn't going to die anytime soon and she can't kill him either, but he just asks why not. Then her dad cuts in, "Because my daughter's husband is the emperor," but they don't expect his response. His voice is sharp, clearly unbothered as he asks, "So what does that have to do with anything?" Then he asks if she's saying emperors don't die. He's still a person, isn't he? Even emperors can die. Amused by Chris's brazen attitude, a smile tugs at the corner of her father's lips and he asks, "Then how about you become the emperor?" Vivian turns to her father, looking absolutely lost, while Chris helps himself to another cookie. He asks Vivian if the empress seat is what she wants and declares afterwards that he's got it. "If it means I can marry you, I'll kill him without hesitation." On the other hand, Stella storms into the emperor's office. The emperor's right assistant tries to calm her down, however she just insists on seeing the emperor. The emperor asks her what's wrong and she reports to him everything that had happened. "My budget, it's barely a speck." Rubbing his head lazily, he tells her it's not just her but he and Vivian also got the same, however she just asks if that makes any sense. Frustrated, he yells out, stating the emperor and empress's palace cost way more to maintain but they still have her the same budget, but she just asks him to listen. She explains that Vivian has always been rich and he trusted her when he married her, "So shouldn't you be spending more on me?" She snaps. At wit's end, he remains silent. He reflects on the dowry that should have come with the marriage, but ever since the thing with Stella got exposed, he hasn't heard a word from the Duke. He reaches to comfort Vivian. He tries to reason with her, disclosing how the empire's finances are tight now, suggesting they try to be as frugal as possible, but her response pushes him too far. "So you're telling me to live like a pauper?" Immediately he snaps, "Like a pauper?" He asks her whose fault she thinks it is, leaving her confused. Then he goes calm again and reveals the dowry that the Duke of Karlsruhe promised for the marriage. All of it vanished the moment she was brought in as a concubine. But she mentions regardless, since they're married he should have paid up. Then he asks what'll happen if he suddenly wants a divorce. "Have you ever handled that much money? No, right? Then keep quiet, unless you want to be kicked out of the palace." He turns away with a new resolve. Right, the Duke of Karlsruhe is out of the picture, which leaves only one choice left: take everything Vivian has. Finally, it is the last day of the banquet. Stella stands with some nobles. She shares with them that unlike the empress who had an arranged marriage, she and the emperor actually fell in love at first sight. The ladies react with warm admiration, questioning if that isn't what one will call fate when the empress makes her appearance. She locks eyes with Stella, who stands, arms crossed, with a smug look carved into her face, a faint sneer tugging at the corner of her lips, like she's already won some invisible battle. The emperor arrives at that moment, she greets him and again he asks if they really have to keep such formalities between them. With a smile and very obvious rosy cheeks, he asks her to a dance and with his outstretched hand towards her, her thoughts consume her, that is the man she remembers, always smiling, just like that. She recalls how when they affirmed their love for each other, they exchanged gloves instead of exchanging rings. Don't touch filth, don't shake hands with the deceitful and no matter what, never let go of each other's hands, that is what they promised. Back then when she thought love was everything, as if fleeting emotions ever meant anything important. But not this time, she doesn't fall for it, instead she just stares at him, her expression cold as she asks what he's trying to do. He tells her he was just reminded of the good old days, but this time around she asks if he's trying to humiliate her. He doesn't drop the act, instead he continues with the play asking why he would do such knowing fully well how much he cares about her but she responds with a sneer. You care about me? What, that's my line. At the final battle she held the front lines, leaving only enough enemies for him to handle. She thought it would help elevate his image as emperor and he would stop feeling so insecure, everything she did was for him. He tells her he's aware she went through all that because of him, but he was having a hard time too, and she asks if Stella then conveniently happened to be there for him. He responds with a yes, following with an apology and then an excuse explaining that doing that was the only way he could breathe, but she simply remarks that he's even more crazier than she thought. Crazy, huh, you've always been so high up, you wouldn't understand what it's like to be unloved and tossed aside, how miserable I was, how I was rotting on the inside. Her voice remains steady as she tells him he knows she did it all for him and he admits he knows but she never once asked what he truly wanted. She's put up with much of his nonsense that her patience wears out. Raising her voice she asks what it is that he wants, pointing out that he never once told her what he wanted either. She tells him he's the one who ruined their relationship and now he's blaming her for not embracing his tragic past. In response he tells her she still remains his wife, that hasn't changed, promising he'll take care of her from then on. She doesn't fall for it, she bows gracefully, Your Majesty, maybe save the useless talk, go take care of the concubine you love so much. However he insists, he notes she's taken care of him so now it's his turn, he informs her he wouldn't hide behind her anymore, stating he'll form his own merchant guild or even a knight order, and then it clicks. Ah. So he's just asking for something after all. The Imperial Guard was a private force she created for Alex and while they may appear powerful on the surface, the true power lies with the Merchant Guild and the devils she controls. So now he wants her to hand over everything under the pretense that it's for her. Does he think I'd fall for such a cheap trick? The Emperor's mood shifts as he glances back and notices Stella glaring at him in the midst of murmuring nobles. Vivian also takes advantage of his distraction, she assures him she's doing just fine without him, so how about you stop paying attention to me? She returns to her palace, her conversation with Alex already confirming all her suspicions, Alex is trying to take what's mine. She orders Helena to give her a cloak. She checks with her to see if she knows what to say if anyone asks where she is and she nods. She tries to come with her however Vivian declines thinking if she were to come, she might faint. Still she's got a bad feeling. The Merchant Guild is fine, Lisp has full control of it, but the devils, they're way trickier. Devils were a group for intelligence and cleanup work, created to help win the fight for the throne. Even though she founded the group, ultimately they believe their loyalty lies with the Emperor and now that leave has come, they're probably waiting for Alex to reward them. They still call her commander and follow her but that's only as long as she's on the Emperor's side. Even if she can't get the whole Devil's group for revenge. She has to get Lyle. Later, at the Devil's headquarters, a man lies comfortably on the rooftop, eyes half-lidded in quiet ease. At the sound of his name, he shifts, startled, adjusting himself as he sits up. The surprise on his face fades quickly as he meets her gaze and asks, without hesitation, what brings her here. Lyle is the mage from the Devils. Playfully she asks why he's hanging on a rooftop but he just sulks, my sister became someone else's man, you think I will be happy about that? She asks him why that will matter since she still remains his sister, but he just points out the obvious. Aren't you newlyweds? Should you even be here? Without hesitation she asks if he knows emperors can have multiple wives and discloses that night Alex is with Stella. She reintroduces Stella to him as her cousin. This time she adds that Alex has made her his concubine. In a swift motion, Lyle turns towards asking what about her. He notes that she helped him become emperor, referring to him as a bastard, and asks if that bastard shouldn't repay her. He asks if they weren't madly in love with each other, bringing up how she practically risked her life to make him emperor, so why'd he give that spot to some chick? Vivian, looking to change the topic simply, states that he has his reason and reveals she needs someone to help. Without hesitation he agrees, noting he's the emperor's personal mage. Sis, didn't you say you were taking a different path than that bastard? Make me exclusive to you, that's my only condition. She buried her head in her lap, drawing his immediate concern as he asks to know if she doesn't like the idea that much. However, it's quite the opposite. Struggling to hold back her tears, she thanks him, although I can't promise you anything, stuff like titles or a stable future. But he simply responds that he's in the devils because of her anyway. He suggests her quitting being empress while she's at it, and in response she asks how it'll be possible for her to have a personal mage if she isn't an empress. As planned, she pays a visit to the devils. Like she'd observed, they were more loyal to the emperor. Faced with her unexpected presence, a man asks why she isn't there with the emperor. She isn't in for small talk. She breaks the news immediately without hesitation. As of today, I'm cutting ties with the devils. Devils have served His Majesty well until now. His Majesty will fulfill the promise he made soon. She thanks them for everything, and before they take their leave, Lyle leaves them with a warning: everyone, don't trust the emperor too much. In a new scene, she informs her father she would like to bring Lyle into the Empress's palace as an attendant, suggesting they bring him in under the guise of a personal physician. Her father, after thinking on it, notes that a physician might raise suspicion, suggesting an attendant from a secretary background would be better. He orders Alfredo to help Lyle with his disguise. Then afterwards she asks if he'd like to meet Chris. She asks her dad for a report on Chris, and he informs her although he's still rough with posture and swordsmanship, he's picked up a lot of etiquette watching Commander Ark. He summons Chris in afterwards, and as he bows low, greeting the Duke, Vivian observes in awe. He goes to her after that, asking why it's been so long, revealing he was going to go find her if she didn't show up. Then Lyle pitches in asking if that is the wandering mercenary, but Chris simply points out that he's in the middle of speaking to the woman who will be his future wife, warning him to get lost, whoever he is. But maybe Kyle doesn't take the news too well, and Vivian can only manage an awkward laugh. Her father reveals Chris can also already produce aura and goes ahead to quiz him in the presence of the lady. After which Vivian introduced Chris to Lyle. What began as a harmless introduction quickly devolved into a quiet war of backhanded remarks, polite on the surface, but every word loaded with pointed subtext. Later that night, the Emperor pays a visit to the devils just as Vivian had thought. They bow to greet him, and while they're down he asks about Vivian, but they respond asking why he's asking them about her since they haven't seen her themselves in a few days either. Is that so? You've all worked hard in the meantime. As promised, I came here to reward you for your service. Back in the Devils he was just an ordinary kid. The members of Devils took care of him and always cheered him on, but it was never enough. There was something deep inside him that remained empty. And then one day, almost like a dream, the Empress and Empress of the Empire both stood before him, looking to have him on their side for the coming war. According to them, they heard he was the most skilled amongst the Devils. The Emperor extended his hand to him, said, "I want you to become my sword." And the moment he heard those words, he felt like something inside of him was finally whole. Now it had become his motor, recognition earned through blood, sweat and tears. I never want to lose that. In a new scene, Vivian steps into her carriage. Lyle, who was supposed to go with her, suggests she returns to the palace alone first since he has somewhere to check. He reveals there's a safe house hidden by the Devils, so he should at least go and say a proper goodbye. He teleports to his destination, and as he walks up a flight of stairs, his mind lingers on the thought of the devils falling into Alex's hands. He admits he has a bad feeling about everything, so he'll need to see it himself to check, and as soon as he steps into the place he's immediately greeted by the sight of blood scattered everywhere. He makes his way deeper until he finally hears a familiar voice. He rushes to him, asking to see if he's okay, when a young girl suddenly rushes out and informs him she was so scared. Holding her, he asks what happened, and she reveals the Emperor betrayed them. Another survivor urges him to go tell the commander, and he agrees. At the Empress's palace, Lyle walks in. Her maid panics and alerts her of an intruder, but she quickly calms her down, saying he's with her. Immediately she asks about the members, and with his hands clenched to his chest, he discloses Alex attacked the devils. Stunned, she can only mutter a sharp, "What?" as she ponders after. Why would Alex do such? He knows the devils have people he needs, no way. Because of me? Did I change the future? She pulls herself together almost immediately, demanding that they go save whoever they can. She turns to her maid Helena and orders her to contact her father and request the knights, fully armed just in case. Afterwards, she picks up her sword, her expression. On the field, Zed orders a knight to check every one of them to see if they're actually dead, stating they are pros at hiding like ghosts. He barely managed to give the order when a knight suddenly informs him the Empress and the Blue Wolf Knights are approaching from afar. The Empress, upon noticing him, gets off her horse and demands to know what he thinks he's doing. Unfazed, he responds that they're acting on official orders. They'd received intel that rebels were gathering and moved to eliminate them. Striding forward, she asks if he doesn't know who they are. She reminds him they were once his comrades and now he's referring to them as rebels. However, he simply states that he only followed the Emperor's orders. The next second she delivers a sharp slap across his face, then her voice rings. So if he says kill, you just kill? Who the hell do you think you are? Once again he tells her he was just following orders, prompting her to ask since when the Imperial Guards turned into an assassination guard. She asks him to take a look at the people he's killed, asking how he could do it so easily. Instinctively, he glances behind, his eyes landing on the body of the ones who were once his comrade, and a flicker of guilt flashes in his eyes. He doesn't settle too long with that feeling. Instead, he directs her to take it up with the Emperor if she has any complaints, revealing they will be taking their leave. Vivian crouches down, inspecting the bodies. Her heart becomes heavy and tears begin to pour down her face as she thinks, because of her, so many lives were lost. Because of her arrogance in thinking she knew Alex. Because of her complacency in believing he'd keep his promise to them. She blames herself for everything that went down, but even after everything, she's still. Her gaze lands on a shiny object in a fallen soldier's hand, and she instinctively reaches for it, wondering what it could possibly be. She returns to the hideout. She informs the others they couldn't find more survivors, and to Lyle, she admits she was foolish, stating she never thought he would betray them. Biting her lips bitterly, she mutters an apology, but then their leader proposes, "Commander, let's start again." He tells her they can't just sit back and take that, and another reveals he knew it, that there was no way he'd keep his promise. Still, they mention at least she didn't betray them. "We don't blame you, Commander, so let's start over again." Lyle turns to Vivian and asks if she can remember they began the Devils with exactly 15 members. At its peak we had over 100, then when the Imperial succession conflict broke out, our numbers dropped fast. Now we're back to 15 again. Lyle finishes. She gains a new resolve, realizing she should perhaps be thankful that Alex revealed his true color, because now, she doesn't have to fight alone anymore. She orders a man to inform her father about the incident and help find a safe place for the Devil's members. Also, she passes an item to him and asks him to keep it safe, revealing it might become evidence later on that Alex attacked Devils. As she turns to leave, she ponders on Alex's feelings. He must be delighted by now, imagining her losing her mind and flying into a rage. But I'll show him soon enough just how foolish his decision was. Later, at Bahakman Port, Wal meets up with a man. He informs him he's from the imperial palace and has come to escort him. The man asks if he's from Count Patera, but he tells him someone even higher sent him. Later, at the Empress's palace, Lyle arrives with Mr. Modini. He greets her immediately while she ponders silently. Alex might have control over the devils, but he wouldn't be able to touch the merchants so carelessly. And since he loves extravagance, he'll probably want to bring them to his side as soon as possible. She sees a new opportunity for her. Now that Alex is practically broke, I need to intercept the imperial business opportunity that Count Patera is aiming for. She asks the merchant what his opinion is about the Kruets Empire, and he responds that he believes it is a nation with great potential and it's recovering quickly despite the damages from the Civil War. Then she asks if he thinks his luxury goods, pink salt and spices, will sell well in the empire. He clears his throat and reveals afterwards, salt and spices aren't luxury anymore, they're essentials. Then she asks, "From the merchant group I operate, I'm thinking of importing salt and spice this time, how about signing a contract with me?" Just then, her maid Helena comes to her and informs her of the arrival of someone, and she asks him in. Lips walks in, exchanges brief introductions with the merchant, then gets straight to the point, asking them to hear the details of the deal. The merchant then disclosed they're currently trading salt at 13 gold per 10 kilograms including tariffs. He continues stating spices come in different kinds, so prices are listed in a catalog and a 30% tariff is added on top of that for the final cost. Vivian praises his honesty, noting that some merchants don't even list prices in their catalogs and instead look for ways to cheat, but he simply chuckles and asks how he could ever deceive the Empress. Lips cuts in, he informs her transactions with her are tax-exempt. He explains that royals are exempt from tariffs, meaning she can proceed without tariffs. He also mentions if a certain amount is imported, they throw in an extra 10% on the order to account for losses during the transport, so she wouldn't have to worry about getting shorted on her orders. The merchant agrees with a shaky voice, admitting it's true, though there might be exceptions, but Vivian simply asks if they can proceed with drafting the contract. Nervously, he says he'd still like to give it a bit more thought, and she instinctively asks, "Are you seriously hesitating in making a contract with the Empress?" On the other hand, the Emperor sits unsettled in his office. It's been a while since they attacked the devils, so why is it so quiet? His assistant then asks if he's heard the latest news, revealing that a number of merchants have recently been seen entering the Empress's palace. He voices his suspicion, pointing out that the palace budget shouldn't be enough to warrant the presence of so many merchants. There are rumors that Her Majesty the Empress is taking over the imperial business that Count Patera has been planning. The Emperor leans back in thought, so she's just trying to fill her own pockets, huh? That trading group was supposed to come to me from the start, but it doesn't seem like she intends to hand it over quietly. He then instructs his assistant to send a formal visit request to the Empress's palace. His expression darkens, his ruby red eyes emotionless as he questions. So the devils wasn't enough for her? Later, Vivian sits quietly in her study when a clear, unmistakable knock, steady and deliberate, taps against her window. She immediately rises, thinking it might be a secret letter. But to her surprise, all she finds is a bouquet of flowers lying on the floor. As she bends to pick it up, wondering what message it could possibly carry, her maid enters to announce the Emperor's arrival. He steps in, and as Vivian moves to greet him with formalities, he simply waves it off, asking that they drop the titles when it's just the two of them. His eyes settle on her ladies in waiting as he ponders silently, should I deal with them next? She asks what it's about, and he casually replies that it's nothing important, just something concerning the Merchant Guild, the one they supposedly used to run together. But she cuts in, her tone steady. She tells him she's well aware of the guild she manages now, but has no memory of any guild they ever operated together. Then she asks, was there ever such a thing? The Emperor stares at her in cold silence, his expression tightening, with quiet fury. Then, he finally speaks. He reveals the only reason he stayed out of the guild was because he completely trusted her. However, now that it's come to this, surely, the money earned using my name should rightfully be mine, don't you think? She gently sets down her teacup, unbothered, and says he must be mistaken, so she'll make it clear. People did business with me, Vivian von Karlsruhe, not with you, the powerless bastard son. He notes nothing good comes from provoking him, and she admits she's aware. She meets his gaze, unflinching, fearlessness burning in her eyes as she drops the question, then why did you mess with the devils? She reminds him they played the biggest role in placing him on the throne. They were the most loyal to him, the ones who never once wavered, so he shouldn't have forgotten that, not if he's even remotely human. Showing not the slightest hint of remorse, he responds coolly, saying the devils would have only held him back eventually, so Zed simply took care of the problem before it could grow. He brushes the subject aside and moves on to the next, the reason for his visit: it's money I need to spend on my servants, can't you even spare that much? She asks why she should be the one to pay for that, but he answers without hesitation, saying he's the emperor of the nation, and she's the empress whose sole duty is to take care of him. Instead, she meets his gaze and calmly asks if he's ever wondered why people address her as Your Majesty too, the same way they address him. I didn't become empress by the emperor's choice, I made myself empress by putting you on the throne. She tells him that if he's truly that desperate for money, she's willing to lend it, but only if he signs an IOU. Dropping a sheet of paper onto the table, she adds with a sharp smile that he has nothing of value, so what exactly should she take as collateral? Then, her voice turns icy. If you fail to repay by the deadline, how about handing over one of your arms? That's it for now, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment if you'd like there to be a continuation for this recap.